roughly 385 BCE, an intellectual dialogue was held between two learned men known as Meno and Socrates. In this conversation, the two men argued whether the concept of true virtue was taught, learned, or innately born within every human. The conversation itself did not find a true answer, as virtue proved difficult for anybody to genuinely quantify. However, another interesting conversation sprouted up within its place. As a part of their conversation about the ability to learn, Socrates proposed that he could teach a young boy with little education a complicated mathematical concept. As he began to teach the boy, he first presented the equation, asked the boy a few questions, and asked for the answer, which the boy confidently gave. Then, after a few more questions, Socrates presented to the boy by guiding him along through a thought process that the equation and the answer he had come to were incorrect. This then prompted Socrates to ask further and further questions, allowing the boy to realize where he had gone wrong, and then the questions that he would need to ask in order to solve the problem himself. In the end, Socrates proved his point to Meno with a fascinating conclusion. He had taught the boy not by explaining the concept, but instead leading the boy through a thought process that would cause him to ask questions of the information that he himself was missing. After that, it would be the boy's choice to pursue that missing knowledge, and then he would have to ask those questions of himself and not rely on Socrates any longer. See, in a story about growth, there is little more impactful than a good mentor. They're typically individuals who have been there, done that, possessing an impressive store of wisdom and knowledge that can guide the protagonist. But their wisdom isn't just about knowing things, it's about understanding the world around them, the people, the events, what has occurred, and understanding exactly what the protagonist might be going through.
But to tell you the truth, you do not look like the criminal type.
I know. I'm just confused.
Mentor characters are a staple of most coming-of-age stories, and, well, stories that typically go along the hero's journey. They are an incredible role that is very important because they are a valuable asset in pushing the narrative forward, convincing the characters to do better, and overall reaching the end goal of whatever the story is trying to tell, whatever lesson lays at the end of the page.
Saruman believes that it is only great power that can hold evil in check. But that is not what I have found. I found it is the small things, everyday deeds of ordinary folk, that keeps the darkness at bay.
And it's no surprise that people want to try and play this type of character. Immediately people come to mind like Gandalf, or Dumbledore, or Iroh. You know, old wizened men who have gone a long path forward teaching things. However, there's a lot of other characters out there that are not just old men. There are many mentor characters, and they come in all shapes and sizes.
You goob. Hey, this isn't all on you, but you keep learning and you keep fighting.
What's not to like, huh?
Thanks, Ida. I think I'm ready to carve.
They don't even have to be old. Typically, they simply provide the role of providing context, clarity, and a very heartfelt emotional connection with the main character. But of course, we don't talk about typical stories, we talk about TTRPG storytelling, and as all of the archetypes that I talk about, it is not so easy to play, because one, who's the main character? I mean, yes, you could technically be a mentor for everybody in the party, but just being the mentor character can get a little boring. The mentor character is typically meant to stay on the sidelines, maybe occasionally step forward and do something very impressive that, well, honestly is very cool and memorable, a la Iroh.
Did I ever tell you how I got the nickname, the Dragon of the West?
I'm not interested in a lengthy anecdote, Uncle.
It's more of a demonstration, really.
Or Dumbledore. Or Gandalf.
You shall not pass!
But the point is they come, they do that, and then they leave. They're not there for the full story. Not only this, you have to kind of mentor the whole party, which not everybody is on board with. Typically, the main character of a story needs a mentor to have, but that's not necessarily true for everybody in the party. Maybe they don't all want a mentor. Maybe everybody at the table isn't down for that type of character. So how do you play this character? Well, glad you asked.
You don't.
You don't. You give up. Give up. Go home.
When you have a bad day, give up. Go home and sleep.
How do you transform the knowledge you have into wisdom that will guide your heroes? Especially when you yourself have not gone through the experiences that your character has. Well, honestly, it's not about having all the answers. It's about helping the protagonist find them. A mentor's role involves guiding, questioning, and offering insights that can spark discovery, but they do not ever force it. See, Like I mentioned earlier, within the entire story of Socrates, he taught the character to ask themselves their own questions. And if you pay attention to most well-written characters that are mentors, this is the same thing. Yes, they might say some advice, they might give some things, but ultimately that advice, if it is good advice, will usually lead the character to not just take the advice at face value. Instead, it'll force them to ask questions about themselves. It'll force them to look into a mirror and say, well, what am I about? What is going on here? What do I believe in?
Is it your own destiny? Or is it a destiny someone else has tried to force on you? I'm begging you, Prince Zuko. It's time for you to look inward and begin asking yourself the big questions. Who are you? And what do you want?
And that is really crucial for a character to go through when going through a character arc. But you can't just do that, especially, again, because we're not all old, wizened individuals. How do we do this? How do we develop this character? Well, the first thing you need to do is identify who you're trying to mentor and why. Most mentor characters have regret. This is just true of almost any of them. Anytime you see somebody who wants to help somebody else out, they want to do so because they themselves have made those mistakes in the past.
If only I could have helped you. Leaves from the vine, falling so slow, like fragile, tiny shells, drifting in the foam. Little soldier, come marching home. Brave soldier boy comes marching home.
But you also have to identify who it is that made the mistakes that your character has. Session zeros are excellent for this because then you could simply develop that mentor-like relationship ahead of time. You can develop your backstories together, create interesting parallels, maybe even have a joint backstory with another player character.
It's wonderful to see you, Gandalf!
But if you haven't had the chance to do that at this point, all you need to do is identify an issue which another character is going through and find out how that identifies and relates back to your own character, so therefore that mentorship can begin to bond. But that's not the full story. Because yes, while you start mentoring them, again, most of us playing these games are not these older, wizened individuals for all walks of life. So how do you deal with that? Again, I mentioned that regret, and we're gonna fall back on that. Identifying the regret is one thing, but forcing your character to teach another character to make other decisions is not helpful. How many times when we were children or teenagers growing up and our parents looked at us and said, oh, when I was at your age, I did this and this and this, and you better not do that, and you actually listened to them. It doesn't help to have somebody say, I've been through what you have, don't do this, because it doesn't provide empathy. And this is where you can avoid needing to actually have that wisdom, because you're not trying to impart wisdom on this individual, you are trying to impart on them the desire to ask questions and to think about their own decisions. Don't tell them, I've been through this, don't do it, because, I mean, what teenager has ever listened to that? Instead, provide empathy, provide understanding. Let them know what you've felt in that past, that regret that you've felt. Ask them to look upon themselves.
You listen to me right here. Having panic attacks, that is not a character flaw, do you understand? You are not a coward, you have a medical condition, all right? I was in a truck stop bathroom sucking off a border patrol. You understand me? No. Now,
and I've gone to him several times before, and I'll go to him again because he's a great character. Iroh is an excellent example of this, specifically in the scene where he ends up discussing with one of the other characters, Toph, who is one of the most stubborn.
Here is your tea. You seem a little too young to be traveling alone.
You seem a little too old.
Perhaps I am.
He never tells her what to do. He never tries to coddle her or chastise her. Instead, he only asks her questions and relates with her, empathizes with her, causes her to eventually look upon her own actions and who she is and her relationships with other people.
You wouldn't even let me pour my own cup of tea.
I poured your tea because I wanted to, and for no other reason.
People see me and think I'm weak. They want to take care of me, but I can take care of myself by myself.
You sound like my nephew, always thinking you need to do things on your own, without anyone's support. There is nothing wrong with letting people who love you help you. Not that I love you, I respect you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Sharing tea with a fascinating stranger is one of life's true delights.
No, thank you for what you said. It helped me.
This truly is the mark of a good mentor character. Somebody who doesn't try and force somebody else to do something. Instead, they simply get them to ask questions of themselves, because that's ultimately all we can do in life for the most part. And honestly, it's not just about teaching. Remember, even the wisest of mentors can still learn. In fact, their ability to continually learn adds depth to their wisdom. As a mentor, you adapt and grow with your mentee, learning as much as they do while you're teaching.
Oh, and about your nephew? Maybe you should tell him that you need him too.
Mentors are honestly master students. If you are somebody who wants to impart wisdom and knowledge onto others, it is most likely because you continually begin to learn that wisdom and knowledge. And most people who begin to learn this much begin to realize one simple thing: the more they know, the less they actually realize that they know. There is so much out there to learn, and as they begin to go through these walks of life, they realize how difficult and challenging it is for those who have been there prior. It's a difficult thing to go through. So you can't just assume that your character knows everything, because they should know that they don't. And more importantly, a mentor should know that people don't change until they feel validated. And this is difficult. Imagine this. Imagine your whole life you have been taught, you have been convinced that in order to get somebody to do something for you, you have to punch them in the stomach. That's what you were taught. The society you were raised in did that. And so now you are convinced that you must punch people in the stomach to get them to do what you want them to.
Dude, if you do that again, I'm gonna punch you. I'm not kidding. Dude, I warned you. I said I was gonna do that if you did that again.
But as people begin to try and teach you and force you to learn that that's not the case, you have to come to a conclusion. You have to realize that you have punched a lot of people in the stomach and caused pain for no reason. For them to be correct, you have to be so wrong that you have to accept that you have done a very painful thing to a lot of individuals unnecessarily. That's a hard conclusion to come to. And yes, the example I'm using is over the top because, frankly, if I were to relate it to any specific actual real world situation, it could get a little dicey and touchy for some people, but I hope that you can take that and, well, translate it in the ways that you need to. Understand that you are asking somebody not just to understand that they were wrong, to understand that they did something harmful. That's hard. People don't change unless they feel validated, unless you understand them and let them know, I understand you went through this, I understand why you were doing it, but I need you to understand it was wrong. I don't think you're a terrible person, but I do think you need to recognize where you went wrong with this. That is a very important part of being a mentor. And people who are filling this role in stories have typically come to terms with that fact because somebody did it to them in the past, and now it's time for them to do it for another individual to help them grow and learn. And ultimately, I'd like to return back to the beginning of the video, where I mentioned a story involving Socrates and the boy, and he taught complex concepts and all that. I've mentioned it a few times at this point. I've seen a lot of instances of people attempting to play mentors, of wanting to play that wizened individual that we've talked about. But the problem is, at least as far as I see it, is that they attempt to give advice that applies to them. But the truth is, the longer I live in this life, the more I realize the only thing you can truly teach to others is how to ask themselves a question. All you can do is prepare one to explore the world. All you could do is teach them on how to ask things critically, on how to try to actually understand what's going on around them, and when a factor or a new decision is placed in front of them, to ask themselves a question of what's actually going on here, what's the actual motivations of those around me, what's happening? We can't really teach anybody everything because there's so much in the world that our brains literally can't contain it all. All we can do is teach people to ask and try to understand what's immediately in front of them because we don't know what they're going to experience in life. And most importantly, a mentor understands that they're not going to be alongside their mentee all their life. Your job is not to answer things for them. It's not to give advice for every situation so they never have to think. It's to teach them to think for when you are gone. And that is something that's important because it's the only thing that we can do. All we can do is teach other people to think. All we can do is teach other people to empathize, because with those tools, they can learn and accomplish anything. But if we just do it all for them, what truly have we accomplished? I think that's what being a mentor is all about. So, go out into the world, make it your own. Never forget to play a role and listen to my wife as she gives the call to action.
My birthday's in June, and you guys have a steep goal, and that is get Jay to 100,000 subscribers by June.
By June?
By the end of June.
That would be insane.
Like, comment, subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe too. If you like his content, tell him what more you want to see from him. And if you don't do it by my birthday, you won't get a face reveal.
Whoa, wait, a face reveal?